is organizing. And this particular webinar is in partnership with, CRC, Water Sensitive Cities, Alluvium, and these are the two organizations in Australia with whom we have partnered. And this webinar is supported by Department of Environment, Land and Water Planning, and we have Representative Michael joining us from the department. And we are very happy to see people in good attendance. This event is also live streamed, and we are also recording this event for everybody's information. So I hope everybody's all right with that. And recording will be made available later on. So I am very happy to share that, we also have 3 of our partner agencies, central government, Central Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization, with whom we have worked for over a decade. And we have state government of UP and state government of Odisha, who are our formal partners and with whom we have been pushing the agenda for making water sensitive cities, addressing the challenges of increasing incidences of urban flooding, to address the groundwater and the surface water linkages, because groundwater is exploited and it is an important source of water supply, and there is an increasing widening gap of water supply resources in India. And this all also results its impact onto the river. And we have a partnership with National Mission Clean Ganga, where we are supporting them for citywide water and sanitation. And also all these good practices which we are going to talk today have ultimately an impact on the improved river flows if we are able to make water sensitive cities. So I think this is a very important area, and we have been championing this for over 3 decades when CSC published its first report called Dying Wisdom, where we documented that there is a history of rainwater and stormwater harvesting in different agroclimatic regions of India. However, with post-independence, we have followed a trajectory of institutionalization of water management, where people and decentralized ways of water management and touch with communities have been lost. So water sensitive, making water sensitive cities is a webinar, is an effort to bring together the international state-of-the-art knowledge, bringing the traditional knowledge live again, trying to see that how we can address the challenges which the cities see in 2050, and how we can start positioning ourselves. Some of our partners with whom we have been pushing for this agenda, they have joined here today as speakers, panelists, and we would like to offer them this as a part of our knowledge exchange activity. We do these global events, and I should say that over a period of last 8 months during the pandemic, we have been successfully able to reach out to around 50,000 people through different knowledge exchange activities. Water program per se has been able to organize 12 webinars, and we had 8,000 participants. We are happy to see another 500 people registered today, and out of which 50 international participants. And I would officially formally introduce my colleague who will be co-moderating this session, Harry. So Harry, can you move on and take on from here, introduce yourself, and Shivali, can you help with the slides to move on?
Thank you, Suresh, for the introduction. Shivali, if you could bring the slide on the knowledge partnership, that would be appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Harry Veerasolmi from Alluvium Consulting in Australia. I'm very pleased to bring this event to you today, which has been a joint effort between the 3 organizations here on your screen: Alluvium Consulting, CRC for Water Sensitive Cities, both organizations from Australia, and CSC in New Delhi, the Centre for Science and Environment in New Delhi. We have recently, the 3 organizations formed a partnership, a knowledge partnership, with the one purpose to facilitate the adoption of water-sensitive principles in India. And we intend to do this in a number of ways. We intend to do this through a series of discussions, workshops, and webinar events like the ones today, and capacity building events. So I hope you'll be able to join us in the future on these events. Shivali, next slides, please. And next one. Next one, please. And next one. So today we're running a two-part webinar series, which is one of the first activity of the Knowledge Partnership. So today's event, we've been looking at the journey that Australia, in particular Victoria and the capital city, Melbourne, has taken towards a water-sensitive city, as well as the journey of India. So that's the focus of the webinar today. And next week, at the same time, we'll be running the second part of the webinar, where we'll be looking in more details on exemplar projects that have been actually implemented on the ground, so that you're able to understand how those water-sensitive cities principles have been implemented on the ground and in institution. So I hope you can join us next week as well at the same time for the second part. Shivali, next slide, please. So I hope from the presentations today and next week, you'll be able to understand what a water-sensitive city is and how to get to a water-sensitive city state. Today, we will talk about the journey of Melbourne in Australia, how Melbourne has transitioned from a water supply city on the left and has moved through a number of phases to a water-sensitive city state. It has gone through this by focusing on at an early stage on its water supply infrastructure and services, next on its sewerage infrastructure and services, and on its drainage services, and over time has started to put a focus in terms of its water management, in terms of its impact on the environment and improving on that, as well as looking at a diversity of water sources within the city's boundary itself, and improve on the urban water cycle. And finally, making its way towards a water-sensitive city, which has elements of all these different phases, but doing it in a much more integrated manner, with multiple outcomes and benefits. Of course, this is the journey of Melbourne, and cities in India can go from their current state to water-sensitive state by leapfrogging. They don't necessarily need to follow the same journey. And I hope you see that through the presentation this week and next week. And to get to the water-sensitive city state, we believe there's three principles that cities and urban water management in India can follow to get to this state. And being the three principles of cities operating as a water supply catchment. So this is where cities can get their can look at multiple sources of water within the boundary of the city itself. The next principle being cities providing ecosystem services, and this is around the principle of not impacting on the environment, which in turn benefits the community. And thirdly, cities comprising of water-sensitive communities. Hopefully, this will come out in the presentations today and next week. I will now pass on to Michael O'Neill from the Victorian State Government. Michael is the Manager of Strategic Projects in Water and the Catchment Team in the State Government. Thank you all.
Thanks, Harry. Just going to share my screen. So welcome everybody. Before we begin today, I'd like to take the time to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting all across the world, wherever we're meeting today. I'm coming to you from the Bayside suburbs of Melbourne, which have been home to the Aboriginal people of the Kulin Nation for tens of thousands of years. The traditional country of the Kulin Nation now consists of the great multicultural city that we call Melbourne, where people from many ethnic backgrounds, including some 200,000 Victorians with Indian ancestry, arts, culture and sports are all appreciated. In the words of Boonwurrung Elder Aunty Caroline Briggs, we encourage everyone to nurture and care for this land as we do, with love and respect to protect the rivers, the creeks and the waterways, as they are the blood of this land. The Victorian government, through our India strategy, is really through the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, is really pleased to be able to sponsor this series through the state's India strategy, Our Shared Future. And in the words of our State Premier, Daniel Andrews, Victoria is proudly home to the largest Indian population in our nation, but ours is not just a story of numbers, it's a story of personal connections and shared contributions. So Victoria's India strategy commits us to an enduring partnership based on understanding, engagement and equal exchange. And this webinar series is a great example of just that. Knowledge exchange as we meet the shared challenges of managing our urban growth and transitioning our cities to ones that are water sensitive and livable. So, as you know, Melbourne is the capital of Victoria, which is the second most populous state in Australia. Victoria has about 3% of the country's total landmass, but is home to about 25% of the population. And Victoria and Melbourne's journey to become one of the world's most livable cities has been a very long one. And the journey is closely linked with the transition we've taken and continue to take every day in the way we interweave water into that context through improved planning and policy. So like India, though nowhere near at the scale that you're experiencing, Victoria is the fastest growing state in Australia and Melbourne is the fastest growing city. And over the next 30 years, we're estimating that we'll be a city of 8 to 9 million people. We have 4 of the 10 fastest growing suburbs, and many of these are growing at a rate of around 4 to 5% per year. So we can learn a lot from cities around the world that are already 8 million people about what to do to manage this growth and also not what to do. Like in India, the effect of this growth is intensified by climate change, which is decreasing natural stream flows. It's increasing the severity of extreme weather events like heat waves and bushfires and storms that cause floods. And obviously this is impacting our ecological systems as well. Victoria's water governance arrangements are quite complex and are built up over time. And there are a number of players involved, from central government, government-owned water corporations, local government, catchment management authorities, and then independent environmental, economic and health regulators as well. But the sector operates on a set of underlying principles which underpins and sets the basis for how we manage water, and really that enables a water sensitive cities approach to evolve on top of that. Key to that is a focus on local decision making and place-based solutions. All of these players, no matter who they are, we're all facing the same challenge. So that's less water going forward as climate change takes hold, and increasing demands as population growth hits. In Melbourne alone, we could see a shortfall of 450 billion litres per annum by 2065 if we find ourselves in a worst case scenario. Any conversation about livability in Victoria and in India needs to include water. We all know that, that's why we're here today. So to deal with that, we have these challenges. We have a number of key policy documents. The first is Plan Melbourne, which is our metropolitan planning strategy set out to 2050. And really it seeks to create a more compact, sustainable city where each citizen can meet their needs within 20 minutes of their homes. Importantly, this includes things like green streets and places and open spaces and natural environments alongside essential services such as healthcare and employment and transport. Importantly, Plan Melbourne recognises the role that water plays in a thriving city, and it outlines actions to integrate urban development and water cycle management to support a resilient city. And it also recognises the benefits of things like urban greening. Water for Victoria, which is our state water policy, sets a clear action to put integrated water management into practice and transition to a water sensitive city. And much of this is based on the pioneering research that has been coming out of Monash University and now the Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities. So that focus on livability as an added value in water management is what sets an integrated approach or a water sensitive cities approach apart from water management of the past. Victoria is leading and systematically applying these water sensitive cities approaches through our collaborative statewide programs and forums, which have been set up across the state to bring people together. And you'll learn a bit more about that approach today and the history of that from Chris Chesterfield. I'd really like to thank everyone for coming along today, and Alluvium, the CRC and CSE for all the work and effort in bringing this together. And you know, there is so much that we can learn from each other through exchanges like this. So I'm looking forward to learning as much from you as we share with you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for taking us through the Victorian experience. Thank you, Michael. So can you stop sharing the screen? We can move on in the meantime. May I take this opportunity to invite Director General National Mission Clean Ganga, Shri Rajiv Ranjan Mishra ji, to address in the inaugural session the participants. However, before he starts his address, I would like to say that as a part of our commitment to building advocacy around water-sensitive design and planning, which started in 2017, CSC has submitted a report to a practitioner guide to Ministry of Urban Development on water-sensitive design and planning. And based on that, we have been supporting states and cities in developing roadmap to bring this idea into implementation on the ground. So as a part of this, a couple of months ago, we had prepared a roadmap for Orissa state government for rolling this out, the principles of water sensitive cities in Orissa. And today we are happy to have a report based on the research which CSC has done, which is called Roadmap for Implementation of Water Sensitive Urban Design and Planning. So I would request Rajiv Ranjan ji if he can release this report and then start his address, realizing that the importance of these principles for stormwater harvesting and water sensitive design in particular in Ganga Basin states, and with your experience with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs as well as Ministry of Water, how we can connect these together. I would request you to first release the report, sir, and then give your address. So you can lift the report which is available to you. Rajiv ji, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I am keeping this book. I hope you are able to see.
Yes.
We are able to see.
So this is the second report, sir, to support the states and cities in India. First one we released with Mati Vatnam ji for Orissa. So please, sir, we would like to hear from you this.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am really very happy and privileged to be with you and share some of my thoughts. As very briefly has been explained about water sensitive cities and also the water sensitive design and planning process. It's very important to look at cities and water together. Mr. Rohila has just spoken and told that maybe with my experience in both the sector, I would like to reflect upon them and how we can go together. We all are interested in looking at things holistically, but unfortunately what happens, the way administrative units are designed, often we try to think in silos. And that is how actually the challenge gets multiplied. Today, I'm really very happy to see the expertise from Australia, the Victorian government, and I can recollect I had another session few months back with water and cities together, in which also I had one expert from Melbourne, Mr. Casey Furlong had come, and he had discussed a little bit about the experience of Melbourne. We had people from other cities like Amsterdam and other places also. Reflecting upon this, I think you have very nicely set the tone, saying that basically what exactly is the vision of water sensitive city. They should serve as a kind of potential water catchment. They should also be providing ecosystem services, and there should also be a kind of focus on community. The community also need to be, community in the city need to be water sensitive. So I think these three basic vision parameters have rightly been told there. When we started looking at rejuvenation of Ganga, and when Namami Gange mission was launched for the benefit of some of the international participants, Ganga basin is the largest basin in India. Almost 45% of India's population, and which is quite substantial, you all can understand, live in this basin. And rejuvenation of this basin was considered very important for the national goal, and then that's how a very massive and very integrated approach was set into motion for this mission. And primarily the way mission has been structured, I mean, in a very brief way, one whole lot of things are relating to the pollution abatement. It could be municipal sewage, it could be solid waste, it could be industrial thing. Then one whole lot of things are on ecology and flow. I mean, how to make the flow better. And when you say that water sensitive cities can contribute to the flow and the ecology of the river, there is no doubt it can. It's not easy, but if we are all sensitive towards it and we all work towards it, it's not impossible also. We have seen in some places. And then the third thing in our mission also is how you improve connect of people with the river. When I say river, let's also think little broadly. River also includes water and the water sources, let's say the wetlands and water bodies, the urban water bodies also. And then for all, you will also need a lot of research, lot of partnership, lot of collaborations. We have similar partnership with several institutions, and CSE being one of the important partner of NMCG in this journey. We are also working with National Institute of Urban Affairs so that there is a connect between the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and what we are doing in this mission. So I think we have tried to establish a lot of such linkages. One problem which actually comes in the management of, and today because we are focusing more on the urban setup, so I will also try to talk more about the urban water management. And we all understand, we all want to become good integrated urban water managers, but the way we are organized, we are looking at water in a separate silos. We look at water as a drinking water, we look at river water and groundwater separately. We also look at wastewater as a separate sector. A stormwater is another area which perhaps does not get the right kind of value in our design. And even, I mean, something is not water, but the solid waste, the sanitation also becomes very important, because actually in the city, it's quite a lot of connection between the solid waste and then the choking of drains or the pollution of the water sources. So when we look at these different aspects of water as a separate silo or a separate sector, it becomes difficult. And that's why perhaps the water sensitive cities will have to look at them in a more integrated way, and not just administratively, rather we have to plan. And that's how, when you are showing the water plan, the water for Victoria, that document which was just shown, I think something like that is needed for each of the city. And that is where perhaps this kind of collaboration and partnership can help us in leading to that direction. When you look at potential water supply catchment, several aspects are necessary, and several interventions we are also looking at is basically looking at the wetlands, looking at urban wetland, how to protect them, looking at the floodplain, because ecosystem services, if you have to look at water and the city, see the one problem which has happened, especially in larger cities, the cities started going on the bank of river. But as we started building up more and more, the natural environment has started getting affected, and then the landscape is changing. Now the floodplains get affected, the aquifers gets affected, and ultimately the city environment also gets affected. So when we talk of urban design, when we talk of water sensitive urban design, I think we have to look at how we can have a kind of linkage between built environment and natural environment. How this design can really help in having a kind of more like a complementary thing with each other. So I think that is something which is important, and then that is something for which the panelists, when they discuss, then perhaps we have to look at. I would like to just flag few issues which comes to my mind, and then perhaps which needs to be tackled, which will also pose challenge when we look at the water sensitive design and try to scale it up. Organizational integration is very important, and I'm quite sure in the detailed presentation of from Victoria there would be more discussion on that. It's very interesting how in Melbourne the metropolitan water emerged, how several utilities got consolidated, and a kind of overall structure emerged, a kind of organizational integration took place. Something very similar, something on the similar lines, not so much at the city scale, but a higher scale is also taking place in India. we have got a kind of consolidation by way of the federal ministry called Jal Shakti Mantralaya. So it's looking at the irrigation related thing, the water resource management from the irrigation point of view, from drinking water point of view, and from the rural sanitation point of view. So several sectors of water have got merged into one ministry. So that's one consolidation. Niti Aayog, which is a kind of apex planning body in the country, has also started coming up with composite water management index. So I think some consolidation has started, and then there is much energy with the urban water system, which is led by Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry and Water Ministry. In National Mission for Clean Ganga also, there is a kind of example of integration, because this is a mission, or Namami Ganga is a mission, which is actually having a basin approach. So not only Ganga, all the tributaries come under one organization. So I think the conservation, rejuvenation of all the tributaries coming up under one umbrella, one organization, and then the other rivers also have come into the same ministry. So I think some sort of organizational integration is happening. But the challenge will be, which will emerge from today's webinar, and also when we discuss in the second part, how we really look at that kind of integration, that kind of organizational integration, which has happened very effectively in Melbourne, in Indian cities. There are several examples. I mean, the cities are also trying to do it. Perhaps we will have to look at that. And that organizational integration, you very clearly told about two missions. You are talking about Amrut and Smart City mission. But we will have to look at all the urban missions, and then in certain cities, there are also some river rejuvenation related activity, like in the Ganga basin, perhaps Namami Ganga will factor, then other mission similar activity will be there. So we have to look at all these missions, how we can really integrate them effectively at the municipal level. And that would be our challenge, and that is where perhaps I'm really very happy that Principal Secretary Housing and Urban Development from Orissa is here. So a lot of such integration, lot of such initiative has taken place in that state, and then perhaps when he will look at them, he can perhaps reflect upon them, and then also say how the challenges are there and how they are being met. But this is a challenge, and then we are also trying to do something like you told about city-wide sanitation. So something like in the sewerage sector, at least in the Ganga basin, we are trying to promote one city, one operator kind of concept. So again, it's not fully the integrated urban water management, but we are actually moving in that direction. So some sort of direction is there. Then another thing which perhaps I would like to draw attention is, we have to look at water, and actually you have said that value on water. Alternate source of water also needs to be thought of, and then there could be, I mean, we have to look at rainwater, and then there was a discussion on climate change. We all know, especially in Indian context, the number of rainy days are getting limited. Overall rainfall is not really reducing, but it's very kind of extreme rainfall happens. And then we have several challenges of urban floodings and extreme weather events. So I think reuse of treated wastewater, proper utilization of rainwater harvesting, trying to take a kind of campaign, how we can actually do it. And then there would be several examples and several learning points from Victoria's experience, and then the other global experience. And also in India, there can be, there are several this thing. Similarly, the stormwater. If you look at that, I think just now we released a book, which is very nice book about utilization of stormwater for parks and several other things. So how you can fit in different types of water into the whole urban design. So that's something which is very nicely coming up. And then another thing which is important is look at the local resources, local sources of water. Unfortunately, what is happening, we are bringing water to meet our needs of the city from very far off places. It may not be possible to meet entire requirement, because the cities have grown so much that sometimes the river and water sources are getting lost in the city. But actually, we'll have to find local solutions. So actually, how we can preserve the local sources of water, local water bodies, and don't allow them to be encroached, don't allow them to be lost. I can tell you several examples of cities. We have taken up a kind of urban wetland rejuvenation program, and CSC is also helping, and several other organizations helping us. So we are trying to map, and then we can very easily see several water bodies have been lost. The water channels have been lost with the built environment, and then the kind of construction which has taken place. So I think that brings a major problem for us, and a major area of concern. See, if we can preserve them, lots of our drinking water needs could perhaps be met by the local resources, and we don't have to really transport from long distance, which is not really cost effective. And also it leads to a situation in the long term, it will not be sustainable. I mean, how much money you will invest to bring water if you keep on reducing the local source of water. Another area could be, and that's a very important area which you have also mentioned, about like in National Mission for Clean Ganga, we have actually taken up a kind of 15-year perspective. We construct STP and also the same operator maintains them. We have also put PPP into it. But 15-year may look very long term, but ultimately, unless you think of a much longer term and unless the local bodies, the ULBs become capable of managing their own water, it will be difficult. And that will happen because, see, we are living, I mean, if you look at the Asian cities, they will grow. The urbanization is going to become much intense in future for India. And now, I think by 2030, we'll be having something like 600 million people living here. It's a huge number. So when we look at the urban planning, when we look at the trying to treat wastewater, we have to also look at what is going to happen to the peri-urban area, those areas which may be a village at this present stage, but 5 years, 10 years, they will all be declared urban area, or they will become actually area which has urban characteristics. So we will have to look at urban planning in a much more serious way. So when you actually say that the integration with a smart city mission or Amrut mission or Swachh Bharat mission, I would like to extend it that ultimately this water sensitive cities would be possible only when the urban planning becomes sensitive towards it. And that is where I think I will just like to share very quickly our experience. We had a meeting of National Ganga Council. This is the apex body which is chaired by Honorable Prime Minister of India. And in that, the discussion came then the river cities, and it came from straight away from the Honorable PM that we'll have to think little differently for the river cities. The planning paradigm has to be little different, and that's where the water sensitive river and the urban design becomes very important. So something like that he also told, and then we are trying to work, which we have been we are calling it urban river management plan, and primarily we are trying to look at how we can really integrate some of these concepts into the master plans, because master plan is a kind of legal document, and if master plan starts giving the due importance to some of these things, perhaps it will become enforceable and it will become a long-term perspective. So I think that's something which is very important, and primarily some of the things which needs to be looked at in that is regulation of activities in floodplains, pollution of water bodies from end-to-end approach. So I think that's what we discussed earlier. Rejuvenate water bodies, wetland in the city, ensure a rich riparian buffer. So I think some of the examples of Victoria will also cover it, how you can really do a kind of vegetation on the river banks or on the even on the wetlands, water resources, how you can really develop a more natural green area around the water bodies. Then return of flow to the river. Actually, we have to all think we are receiving a river in a city, and the river is actually going beyond that city also. When it is coming to your city, what kind of water quality and water quantity you are having, and how you are leaving that particular water source of river to leave your city, and what can city contribute. See, city will have its own limitation. The flow will also depend upon agriculture and several other areas, the more on the river basin side. But what the city can do, if we are really sensitive to the water, we will have to see that we return good quality of water back to the river. So I think that is something which should be part of our planning. And then reuse of treated wastewater, we have to have a kind of ambitious target for that. We are trying several states. I'm really happy to share with you, several states have now come up with a kind of their state policy, or they are developing. We are spearheading in which Ministry of Housing and Urban, Mr. Chaurasia is here. He is also part of that group. So, and several states are doing. So basically a kind of national framework for reuse of treated wastewater is being developed by us with the help of several other partners. One area which is very important and lost is river and water has huge economic value. Often we look at river, I mean unfortunate, but often the city administration looks at river and floodplains as a dumping yard. So we are trying to remove the legacy dumps and all that, but if we improve the solid waste management, the river and floodplains should not be considered as a dumping yard. Actually, we have experience of several cities, international cities, where river is actually source of economy, the tourism, the it's a great place to give you a kind of public space. So I think that's again something which is very important, and most important are people. People are very important. We will have to look at, and that's why when you say that the river sensitive community and several things we are trying to do by creating community level volunteers, local people come to the clean the river once in a while on a regular basis. There could be several ways to engage with the students and youth, through quiz, through different kinds of things. So actually, ultimately, you will have to sensitize the community, and people are key. So that's something which is very, very important. And only when people start taking interest and then put pressure on the decision makers, it becomes very important. So in this process, what we have discussed this whole thing, this kind of collaboration, I look forward for adding a lot of value. See what happens, we all, at a conceptual level, none of us will differ from each other. We should be having comprehensive approach. We should have long-term vision. We should be sensitive to water. But how exactly you implement all these ideas into field? And that is where the process becomes very important. And then again, perhaps some of these process could have technical component. Some of these process could also be economic component. So how you analyze economically and convince people that economically it is important. River has to be healthy, not for the sake of river. River should be kept in healthy condition for the sake of ourselves, for the sake of city, for the sake of people. So I think that becomes important. And in this whole process, the collaborative learning is very important. We have to learn from each other. One city has to learn from other city. In fact, we are now seriously thinking and working on that, of creating a kind of city alliance for the Ganga basin cities. Among themselves. Kanpur can look at Varanasi, Kanpur can look at Haridwar, Kanpur can look at Calcutta, and then between themselves they can actually exchange these ideas of making a kind of water sensitive design. And why only Ganga basin? Such kind of alliance should be there in among all the cities. And when you look at Odisha has done several things on integrating a mix of solution for wastewater treatment. It could be septage, it could be sewage. So I think there is so much to learn from each other, and then that kind of alliance, I think if we can have with the experience of Melbourne and then some of our cities. So perhaps I'm quite sure as the webinar progresses, there would be some discussion on that. And we have to remember that lots of problems of water sector, lots of problems in river and sources of water, actually cities have been source of these problems. They have been part of the problem, they will have to be part of the solution also. And this will be possible only when we very consciously change our mindset. And there would be several problems when you start implementing at the field level, breaking the silos and breaking the mindset, trying to bring in community, trying to bring a stakeholder and take their views in decision making and policy formulation and governance. So I think there is a huge opportunity for city building. There is a huge opportunity for collaborative learning and piloting in the Ganga cities. The NMCG would be very keen to carry this process forward along with CSE and other partners, and even with other states. UP Smart City Mission Directory is also here. UP anyway, we have several programs going on. So I think I really look forward to developing this kind of collaborative learning process and having a kind of partnership between some of the cities among themselves and also with Melbourne or any other city. So I will continue, and I am looking forward to listening to your presentation. And perhaps before we go for the second webinar series, we can take home some of the learning points from today's thing and develop a kind of roadmap based upon which we would carry it further forward. But we will have to take it forward. I can tell you very clearly with my experience, whether it is city or urban system or water system, unless we work together, unless we put in the planning for water, planning for city, we will not have a very good future. We will not have livable cities. So I think it's the imperative. It's very, very important for us to give topmost priority in our thinking. Try to list down the problems, the challenges, learn from others how they solve similar kind of problem. I am quite sure Australian experience will also narrate some of these challenges and then carry it forward. So I once again thank the organizers for organizing such a beautiful, selecting such a thought-provoking, such an useful and important topic, and bringing the good resource persons to really deliberate on it. I would continue to be there with you for listening to your deliberations, And once again, I commit my support for this whole exercise, our support from the Government of India for this whole exercise, and eagerly wait for listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv ji, for your enlightening message and the commitment shown. And I would request my colleague Harry to take over from here and also manage time. We'll have to cut short some time with the presentations, with 20 minutes something with the Chris. So please, Harry, take over from me now. Harry is moderating the session with me.
Thank you, Suresh. I will now introduce Chris Chesterfield, who's the Urban Water Planning and Policy Specialist from the CLC for Water Sensitive Cities in Australia. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Harry, and thank you for those fantastic introductions. It just highlighted for me that there are so many similarities between our two countries in terms of the challenges that we're facing and the way we're thinking about dealing with those many challenges. But so it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you about the Australia's experience in moving towards water sensitive cities. I'm really going to focus on a Melbourne example. I guess Melbourne's probably regarded as the leading city in Australia in terms of water sensitive city transitions and the adoption of water sensitive urban design. So I pretty much wanted to focus on that and take you through that Melbourne story, and perhaps finish off by talking about some of the success factors in that journey. You probably recognise the way the Australian water sector is set up. You probably know that Australia is a federation of states, and water is the responsibility of individual states. And within those states, water tends to be managed by large centralised water utilities. In a state like Western Australia, there is one water utility for the whole of the state. For a state like Victoria, we have 19 different water utilities. We have a major water utility in Melbourne Water for the City of Melbourne. And that water utility, and we also have retail water utilities, but Melbourne Water is a bit different in that it also has responsibilities across 13,000 square kilometres of catchment. The City of Greater Melbourne with over 5 million people, but it also manages all of the waterways and has responsibilities for stormwater management and floodplain management within that catchment. So that's a little bit different from other parts of Australia, and that's one of the fundamental reasons I think why Melbourne's being able to take more of a lead, because it actually integrates stormwater management, waterway management with water and sewerage and so on. And I think there has been a history of these sorts of exchanges between Australia and India. And if you are interested in the sort of water sector reforms that have occurred in Australia over the years, there is this publication. It came out in 2004, I think, from Professor Brian Head from the University of Queensland, with the history of some of these water sector reforms and the potential lessons for India. So I guess this idea of the water sensitive city has been presented a couple of times, but water sensitive cities are really about how we manage water to ensure cities are livable, resilient, sustainable and productive. And there are these three underpinning principles that a couple of our speakers have mentioned. But we in Australia tend to talk about our transition to water sensitive cities moving through a number of stages. And again, this is, I think Harry talked about this a little bit earlier. In terms of Melbourne, you can see how Melbourne developed through this phase as a water supply city from early in its establishment, which was really in the 1830s, part of the colonisation by the British. And as Melbourne grew, it needed to find a safe and secure water supply. So it started to invest in infrastructure for centralised water supplies. As it grew even further, we had problems of disease with typhoid and cholera, and so it became important, and there were new technologies available, sewerage systems, to build a sewerage city. As it grew even larger and pushed into more marginal land, onto floodplains, and so on. The damages and disruption caused by flooding and drainage issues became more important, so there was greater investment in that drainage infrastructure, and that was particularly the case through the post-war, Second World War growth period, the population boom that occurred across Australia in that post-war period. But I really wanted to start talking to you about this journey from that sort of post-war period, but really from that sort of 1970s and 1980s, when Melbourne really began to transition into this phase that we call the waterway city, which is where the community really started to become concerned about the pollution of waterways, the loss of those environmental values in our waterways, and important natural assets like Port Phillip Bay and so on. And then how this has transitioned, Melbourne's been sort of then transitioning to the water cycle city. This integrated water management paradigm has really come to the fore. And so that's really, I guess, the story that I want to talk about. But I might just start with what have been some of the drivers for that transition, for that change over time. And these drivers have been a little bit different over that time frame as well. So a lot of the impetus for water sensitive urban design was driven by these community concerns around waterway health. So pollution, the threats to iconic species like the platypus, this chronic pollution from stormwater, but also industrial spills that cause problems. Climate change increasingly has become more of an issue. We've suffered long-term drought. That graph on the top left-hand side is the dam inflows for the city of Perth in Western Australia. Formerly, 70% of its drinking water came from dams. Now it's only about 10%. The bulk of its water now comes from desalination and groundwater sources. Every Australian city is now, a capital city, has now built a desalination plant because of the problems with water security brought about by drought and climate change. Population and urban growth. So we're just seeing huge areas of new urban development, and there are real issues with livability. A lot of Melbourne's growth is occurring in the west, where rainfalls are less than 500 millimetres. Out in the east, the rainfalls are over, up to 1,200 millimetres. And so the whole livability, urban heat is becoming an issue in those areas. And flooding is emerging as another issue, again, particularly in existing urban areas, because densities are increasing. We're creating more impervious surface. Rainfall intensities are increasing, and we're getting bigger storm surge in our coastal environment. So that diagram in the bottom left-hand side shows you the existing area of urban flooding in an inner city suburb, and the green shows you where that's going to grow to over time with increasing urban densities, increasing rainfall intensities, and storm surges. So we've got to find ways of dealing with all of these things. And essentially, we see these as the key drivers towards water-sensitive cities. They've been a key driver in water-sensitive urban design. But that journey is never an easy one. It's not always a clear pathway. We have issues with path-dependent lock-in. So, large centralised infrastructure, it's hard to deviate from that. We tend to invest in infrastructure when we reach crisis. So we tend to be stuck in the same on technological path dependency. There's sometimes when we get backlash where we try different things, but the community doesn't respond to them, or private sector developers don't like those sorts of things. And then there is just, sometimes it's just hard to change our behaviours and our business as usual ways of doing things. So really I wanted to talk about the last 20 or 30 years in a bit more detail about that transition, which really started back in the 1970s, the 1980s, with this increasing concern about the impact of pollution on our environments. Community campaigns like Give the Yarra a Go, the Yarra River being our major river through Melbourne. The scientific investigations that responded to that community concern identified things like urban stormwater as being a major problem. There was a response to that by coming up with new standards for the environmental management of urban stormwater. We started to invest in new technologies and innovations to deal with that urban stormwater. We invested in capacity building to grow the knowledge and capacity to deal with those issues. We developed tools like software modelling tools like Music. We started to embed some of those practices in standards and guidelines. State government invested in programs to help to apply this new knowledge, and ultimately where we've got to now, as Michael O'Neill talked about, the new State Water Plan, which is really now embedding the policies that support these sorts of practices. But if I just go back to that start, the big concern about the quality of the environment, the impacts of stormwater pollution in particular on our Yarra River environment, on Port Phillip Bay, were investigated by science. Science identified these sorts of problems. Melbourne Water was a significant investor in this sort of science. Key agencies like Melbourne Water came together with the Environment Protection Agency, with local government, to say the only way we can start to deal with this is by collaborating together. This reflects the Victorian Stormwater Action Program, which was initiated in 1999. It's a model, I guess, of how we started to collaborate by developing a stormwater agreement that identified what goals, what our aspirations were, what we needed to be working towards together, what our roles and responsibilities were respectively, the Environment Protection Agency, Melbourne Water, local government, a commitment to best practice approach to dealing with those issues, carrying out those roles and responsibilities, defining that best practice approach in this set of guidelines that you can see on the left here, working out how to implement that best practice through stormwater management plans at the time, providing incentives, funding incentives for developing those stormwater management plans and implementing those management plans. So this is really what started to give momentum to this change in practice from a drainage engineering approach to stormwater management to a water-sensitive urban design approach to stormwater management. It was driven by this sort of collaboration. The development of performance standards and tools to implement those performance standards was really a key to getting that momentum going. So within those guidelines that were developed by that partnership between Melbourne Water, EPA and local government, and using what was then a key research institution, the Cooperative Research Centre for Catchment Hydrology, we together developed these performance standards. We called them best practice performance standards. This is how we were going to manage urban stormwater, particularly in new urban development. We developed modelling tools. The music tool is a model for urban stormwater conceptualisation. Music for short, which has been the basis for our planning and design of stormwater systems now for over 20 years. This is one of the fundamental steps in making that progress. We then started to do demonstration projects. So using the technologies available to us, one of the famous ones is the Lynbrook Estate, which you can see on the left, where Melbourne Water and the CRC for Catchment Hydrology got together with a major commercial urban developer and said, are you willing to try some of these practices? Melbourne Water underwrote the risk of trialling those practices at Lynbrook. They turned out to be a big success. The use of bioretention systems or rain gardens throughout the streetscapes, stormwater treatment wetland as in part of the open space. We got up an initiative called the Healthy Bay Initiative, where we retrofitted these big wetland systems into floodplains in some of our existing urban areas. This really helped get the industry going, the consulting industry to design these technologies, the contracting industry to build these technologies, including contractors who could grow the aquatic plants, for example, to provide then for the needs of the development industry and others to build these sorts of things. And again, investing in the research and starting to provide guidance on how to deliver these sorts of technologies on the ground. Then professional and industry capacity building. So we've had a Clearwater capacity building program operating across Melbourne and Victoria since 2002. It is still going. It's now shifted more broadly to sustainable urban water management, integrated water management, but it started being about water-sensitive urban design. It has trained hundreds and hundreds of professionals in how to use modelling tools like music, taken people on field trips and so on. Then starting to really embed this knowledge and codify this knowledge in planning frameworks, urban planning controls, engineering procedures and so on, in national guidance materials like Australian rainfall and runoff, and local government then starting to pick up and create standards specific to their own municipalities, for example. So I should have said before, in terms of governance, within Melbourne, there are over 34 local governments across that whole region, or across the whole city. The City of Melbourne is one local government within the Greater Melbourne area, which comprises 34 local governments. So it was all 34 of these local governments, and then over 70 local governments across Victoria that were involved in this partnership. But while this was happening, a drought became worse and worse in Melbourne, and this extreme drought started to refocus the political agenda away from looking at the impact of stormwater on the environment to how we need to supplement Melbourne's water supply with alternative water resources. So it's really important, I think, to be able to take advantage of some of those shifts, those opportunities, if you like, to accelerate the change process rather than enabling them to knock you off course. And so the water-sensitive urban design paradigm really began to expand into the integrated water management paradigm and pick up alternative water sources and so on. And that's really where we're shifting into now. And so just to give you an example, I guess, of how that happened at the local government level for the City of Melbourne, its stormwater management plan that was began in 1999 became the Total Watermark Plan, and it moved through a couple of stages of evolution. So it began pretty much with a focus on water quality and protecting the environment, and shifted then into integrated water management and alternative water sources, and then it started to shift, and the city as a catchment, which you've heard about from a number of speakers, and then into flooding as well. And there are multiple projects across the City of Melbourne. This is a diagram of the City of Melbourne. And I'll just talk to you about a couple of these, which are in this particular precinct, the sports and entertainment precinct of Melbourne. And you can see the aerial shot of that. It's right next to the central business district. That's the Melbourne Cricket Ground in the foreground. The tennis centre where the Melbourne Open's about to occur, of course, and the Melbourne Cricket Ground is going to be the site of the Boxing Day Test. And the Indian cricket team is, I think, arriving in Australia virtually as we speak. Over on the left there, the Royal Botanic Gardens. Over on the right, the Fitzroy Gardens. And really now, it's these sorts of projects, these integrated water management, water-sensitive urban design projects. So the Royal Botanic Gardens, for example, is now harvesting stormwater from the catchment around it. It's harvesting around 35 megalitres a year to supplement its irrigation system. And what you can see here is one of the structures that provides storage and treatment of that stormwater. So it's fully integrated into the heritage-listed Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne, right next to the central business district. The Fitzroy Gardens just to the north on the other side of the Yarra, also building these sort of structures to harvest and treat the stormwater, and now irrigating much of their open space. And this structure right next to the Melbourne Cricket Ground, this is the entrance to an underground sewage treatment plant, sewer mining and producing 140 to 180 million litres of Class A water a year. The Indian team will be playing on a surface which is irrigated with this recycled water. It's irrigating all the parkland. It's used for all the sort of washdown operational maintenance activities within the Melbourne Cricket Ground, and for the irrigation of this large parkland, Yarra Park, which surrounds the MCG. And now that watermark strategy is also starting to tackle flooding problems through water-sensitive urban design and integrated water management. This is the south bank of Melbourne, just opposite the CBD. That pink area in the diagram there, you can see the very extensive flooding from overland flows that occur. But I'm going to show, so that's a serious issue, and it's an increasingly important issue. But I'm going to show you a project which is just north of here, through Elizabeth Street in the central business district. It's a very, very famous flood problem in Melbourne. Dramatic scenes like this from 1972 with a big rainfall event, right, one of the major thoroughfares through the middle of the central business district. The initial thinking about how to deal with this was to dig up the whole of Elizabeth Street and put a massive, huge pipe in there to replace the existing pipe, well over a cost of $80 million to do that one piece of work. And instead, through their watermark strategy, the City of Melbourne's looking at a multi-pronged approach. It includes looking at city buildings incorporating rooftop gardens to retain stormwater, to treat stormwater, to harvest stormwater into rainwater tanks and to reuse that water within buildings. The incorporation of rain gardens, again, to capture that stormwater within the urban landscape, to use it to increase soil moisture, to promote an urban forest within Melbourne, to encourage a better urban landscape for people, and to tackle the urban heat issue that's an increasing problem within Melbourne, and the storage of stormwater within the Carlton Gardens, which is within that catchment, right in front of the World Heritage listed exhibition centre, with this water being captured for use within the Carlton Gardens. So getting these multiple benefits, and again, reducing the stormwater volume that's going then into the Yarra River and into Port Phillip Bay. The water sense of urban design is now being used across Melbourne. There are significant areas that are being redeveloped now in Melbourne. This is the Old Port area called Docklands, which has been redeveloped. Water sense of urban design is being used throughout Docklands. Stormwater has been harvested, treated in these sorts of wetlands. You can see here, this one on the top right's right outside the headquarters of the National Australia Bank, and it's been used to irrigate Dockland parks. The rain gardens you can see in the top left, one of the earliest water sensitive urban design techniques used there. And now you can see the Docklands precinct in the top right of that photo, and the Central Business District in the very top right of that photo. This is the largest urban renewal project in Australia now, the Fisherman's Bend precinct. Over 500 hectares of former industrial land being converted into commercial and residential land. And this is really the next phase of integrated water management here, because this is incorporating a local sewage treatment plant. It's also going to be part of the local government waste treatment facility. Organic waste as well as sewage waste is going to be treated, converted into energy, used to generate energy. The treated recycled water is being incorporated into third pipe systems. All of the new buildings are required to have third pipe systems for recycled water as well as rainwater harvesting. The streetscapes are all going to have be blue-green corridors, so they'll have rain gardens in them. This area is very low-lying, ex-swampland, very hard to drain, has existing flooding problems. So all of these sorts of technologies are going to be used to create a highly livable, resilient environment as part of this growth area. So I hope you can see from this story how we've transitioned through these different phases. Over more than 20 years, we've now reached the phase that Michael was talking about with the State Water Plan, which is really starting to embed these practices in policy, drive more extensive collaborations to start accelerating this change. The State Water Plan has identified these 5 broad objectives. It has an integrated water management framework that's setting up the next phase of collaboration between the state, the water utilities and local government, to do the sorts of things that Fisherman's Bend is really doing now. And so this integrated water management paradigm is becoming well embedded in policy and practice. I think we've advanced significantly in that last 20 years. We've well advanced now in our transition to the water cycle city phase, and we're really beginning to show many of the attributes of the water sensitive city. That journey through these stages hasn't been smooth or constant. There have been long periods of little change in some parts of our history. The first half of the 20th century, when we had the First World War, the Great Depression, and the Second World War, there was very little change, but there's also been these periods of rapid progress. But overall, our transition's been a progressive one rather than one of radical change. But we do think that there are opportunities for many cities to leapfrog or to make quite rapid transitions. A city doesn't have to start as a water supply city and advance through all the stages to become a water cycle city, which is the sort of stage Melbourne and many Australian cities are sort of now starting to reach. But a city that has few centralised water services or locked in policy and governance settings could, really have a goal to become a water cycle city rather than transitioning through those different stages. And indeed, it'd make a lot of sense to skip, some of those stages. And as a city, Melbourne, and Monash University and the Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities have learned a lot about how these transitions take place and how the transition process can be steered through these different sorts of through these different stages. We've really learned a lot about how these transitions take place, I guess, and how we can avoid the risk of path dependency and backlash, if you like. So from these sort of 3 decades of implementing practice change through phases of water sensitive urban design and integrated water management with collaboration across the water utilities, local government, professionals from engineering, landscape architecture, urban planning and policy, with research institutions, particularly Monash University. We now have a pretty good understanding, I think, how to steer these sorts of practice changes or transitions. The CRC has captured and applied much of this knowledge now and developed tools and products to support cities and organisations that have a vision to become more water sensitive or water smart. We understand how important champions are, for example, for driving change and innovation, as well as platforms for connecting across disciplines such as engineering and urban planning, and across sectors such as water utilities and local government. We understand how important research and a learning culture are, how critical they are for capturing and applying new knowledge, how projects and on-ground applications are essential for generating new knowledge and demonstrating the feasibility and benefits of new practices, and how this has to be supported by tools such as modelling software to assist planning and design, or governance instruments such as policy or planning standards and controls. So we've been really fortunate in Melbourne and much of Australia to have strong partnerships with research institutions like Monash University over several decades, and you can see how this research has become more and more interdisciplinary over time, reflecting that journey that we've been on to become more and more water sensitive. And it's been from this research, I guess, that our ideas about the water sensitive city and the key principles that underpin it have emerged. The cities as water supply catchments, the cities providing ecosystems, and the cities comprising the water sensitive communities. So I know that we're really pressed for time. I could say more about that research and the products that we've developed from it, like the Water Sensitive Cities Index and so on, but I probably should try and finish it there. But yeah, very grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you about that journey, and thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for this presentation. In the interest of the time, we are going to reorganize. The session, and I would ask my colleague Shivali to put out 1 or 2 slides from the CSC presentation. But Chris, thank you very much for taking us through the journey. Shivali, can you just put out the slides? Just the slide I want is the coexistence of the water and the flooding problems. Chris,
I'm just waiting for a host here.
And just want to announce that our presentation would be done in the webinar 2 on 25th, the CSC presentation, but I want to flag the key issues slides to the panelists. So if you see in India, with the rapid urbanization, we face the same problem. We have a coexistence of water problem, groundwater exploitation, and the flooding. Now coming to the next slide. Can you go to the, yeah. If we have done a quick mapping of smart cities, so-called smart cities in India, what we are developing, the urban flooding issues have been reported in 52 number of smart cities. And you would see that status of groundwater also, which is shown in the red dots, that these smart cities are basically struggling with the groundwater issues. And same is the story with all 500 Amrut cities also, which are the priority urban reform target areas for India. So I would come to another slide, is that potential spaces available. Shivali, can you just move on to those? CSC has done a research, and we have found that there are huge amount of open spaces available, as high as the average built-up area range for a city and urban area is 21 to 26%, but open space is within the built-up area 74 to 79% in many of these big cities. There's a huge potential for doing water-sensitive design and planning. And with this, I would move on to the panelists to react to the thing, and I would request Shivali to put the questions here for on the screen. We will stop sharing this presentation, and we would do a full presentation in the webinar too. I hope, Harry, that's okay with you as a co-moderator. And I am also aware that Vijay Chaurasya ji, if he's still around or he's left, I don't know. He was
here, but I have to leave because of tomorrow's meeting. We are going to hold one preparatory meeting at 11:30. My additional secretary is here. So I request only provide 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, please speak now as a panelist, but we will in the meantime screen the questions to you that how pan-India these kind of interventions, which is water sensitive design and planning, which is listed as one of a good practice in CPHU by ministry, can be mainstreamed. And then I move on to other speakers. So please tell us about you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Suresh. I welcome all participants and panelists. I welcome Director General also and Principal Secretary Government of Odisha, and also Director UP Smart City, and also all esteemed panelists. Here in case of Government of India, we are very much seized of the problem, because what is happening at some point of time, Government of India is really facing the problem that in spite of spending lot of money, the required service level improvement are still eluding. So this is one reason where the role of this water sensitive design comes in place. If I mention, Government of India at present has taken a very challenging this task of providing water to every household by 2025. And if the challenges are not properly handled, challenges when I tell, I mean the water availability, because only providing tap will not help the problem. There should be water available, and as in inaugural address, Director General mentioned that bringing water from far off places is simply unaffordable. In that case, if we are not mending our way that how to provide affordable solution, then we will be not able to achieve the target in time. So Government of India, Urban Development Ministry also, Jal Shakti Ministry also, through various missions, they are trying to address, like I mentioned in case of Amrut, there are reforms that encourage groundwater recharge also, recycle, reuse also, and at the same time reducing water losses also. So these all things are part of water sensitive design, but the same framework in better integrated way is eluding. Like in case of Melbourne, it was shown that integrated water management framework exists. Same type of planning and framework on which cities should develop their plans for this water sensitive design, that is eluding, and I think that is one area which should be given priority. Unless we do that, these reforms are even treatment of wastewater, that is we are treating and discharging in water body or land application, we are not taking value of it. Lot of rainwater is coming, and it is mostly more than 95% it is flowing to rivers and then to sea, and we are not able to take advantage of it. At the same time, in all big cities, we are bringing water from more than 100 kilometers. Lot of pumping cost and all other infrastructure cost is there. Keeping these things in view, this is very important that this water sensitive design approach should be mainstream and integrated in all policy and developmental activities. And to guide as a first step, we have last year brought out a manual on stormwater drainage management. There we have brought out this in detail this concept of water sensitive urban design, and a full chapter is given how we can integrate this water supply, then wastewater, and then stormwater, and then also this groundwater, and how to make in an integrated manner so that self-sustainability can be achieved. Unless we design in that aspect, simply the traditional method that we are following is going to be too cost intensive, and it will be difficult to achieve that. Another point I would like to mention, and it is for information of everybody and especially since Director General is there, Principal Secretary is also there, and Smart City Director is also there. One important thing is that in any case we go, even a proposal is going to finance, lot of checking is there, and everybody try to do due diligence. But when it comes for any infrastructure project, we can ask from ourselves whether a due expert level due diligence has been done in project preparation, whether options has been analyzed, because every option has a bearing on cost, and unless it is cost efficient, the O&M will be further very high and it will be unaffordable. But somehow this approach is like that to manage the speed and to do the things in a very fast manner. Whosoever and whatever level the project is being prepared, it is rushed through that, immediately get it sanctioned, and then let us go for implementation, which should be relooked, and experts should be put in place to prepare these things. They understand what is water sensitive design, how to integrate in the planning, wastewater management, water supply, stormwater. These things ordinarily are less experienced people cannot prepare, and even departmental people of their own also cannot prepare. So this is my submission, that time is ripe, and CSC already they have prepared this framework. We are also going to further associate with them and with other agencies, so that we could mainstream in coming years, so that missions could achieve in true spirit the objective for which it is designed. Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rajiv ji, before I ask Mati ji, do you want to have a quick interaction, something? A short one, but we are running short here, please.
No, I think you are running short of time. So what the presentation from Australian side showed, and I was basically referring that we need to have a kind of problem. Actually, in the last, they actually gave some conditions which will really help. And Mr. Chaurasia has explained about the conditions. So let's hear Mati, and then maybe later on we can discuss.
Mati ji, and then we will move on to Kajal ji. Mati Vatnam ji, Principal Secretary, Orissa, champion for good practice.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to narrate how Odisha, in its efforts to achieve universal coverage of pipe water supply in the urban areas. We have 114 cities having 7 million population living in the urban areas. The cities suffered from acute shortage of water supply, drinking water households. So about 3 years ago, when we took up this challenge and given these mandates to provide pipe water supply to each and every household in all the urban areas, covering about 7 million population, the task has been gigantic. We were supplying 60 liters per capita per day as against a requirement of 135. Only 40% of the area was serviced with the pipe network, 60% was not covered, and only 49 cities, 54 cities were providing water supply, 49 cities were providing deficient supply, that is less than 70 liters per capita per day, and there were only 9 cities that were providing more than 135 liters per capita per day. So we took up the challenge in 2017. We rolled out about more than 800 water supply projects and mobilized about 4,000 crores investment and took up all these projects. Now today, when we look back, we have completed more than 90% of the projects. We have added the pipe network, 120% pipe network has been added. 6,000 new pipe length have been added in the last 3 years, and 61 cities which were deficient are now fully covered with the pipe networks. And I'm happy to say that we have achieved 100% house connection in 10 cities out of the 114, including Bhubaneswar city, which is the first million-plus city in the entire country to provide 100% household connections. Now, all the other projects are in the completion stage. By March 2021, we target to complete another 50 cities, and by December 2021, all urban areas, all 114 urban local bodies, ULBs, would have achieved 100% house connections. That means about 1.2 million house connections would have been achieved. So now the pressure, the challenge is how do we ensure the adequate supply? The pipe network has the distribution issues, the inequitable distribution has been addressed. Now, how do we ensure sufficient supply of water? So most of these, when we added about 224 million liters a day capacity in the last 3 years, mostly the capacity addition has been in the form of groundwater production wells, because the cities were not closer to the river sources, as DG has mentioned, that dependent source is not always economical. We need to bring several kilometers away. Some of the cities are about 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers away from the towns. So it takes time. There are a lot of issue challenges like land acquisition, providing right of way for laying the pipeline. And these pipeline also would cross the rural areas, which also would like to have the pipe water supply. So intermittent, sabotage of the pipeline and diverting the water for non drinking water purpose also. So keeping all those in mind, and the cost implication, and the finding a quick solution, we have gone for a production well based supply, and we have added about 224 million liters a day. And now we have about 1100 million liters a day supply in the entire state. So to ensure that the supply is not interrupted, and the sources are stable. So now we have moved from water supply city to water sensitive city to address the supply issues. So we have gone for a MOU with CSC this year from April onwards, and then started working on getting into a water sensitive design and planning. So not only to meet the water supply requirements, but also our cities have started experiencing urban flooding of late. Very often, the number of incidences during the monsoon have increased. Localized flooding instances have gone up. So due to the erratic rainfall, abnormally very high rainfall received at a very shorter period, to cope with that, as well as to ensure that water security, we have gone for harvesting the rainwater, and we have taken up several measures of late to strengthen the groundwater sources, to recharge and to retain the aquifers. Number of rainwater harvesting structures have been taken up. The templates have been created. The infiltration basins, the detention ponds, bioretention areas, soakways, filter strips. So we have created model designs, and we have roped bodies. At the state level, we've come up with a strategy, state level implementation strategy, with a task force formed at the state. At the individual city level also, we have formed the task force with municipal corporations as well as the development authorities working together. Unified teams for every city we have formed, and the our focus has been top structures. The cities to come up with that rooftop, the inflows in that we have also with the realization that substantial part of the urban landscape is actually the open areas in the form of parks, playgrounds, road network, water bodies, which can very well be tapped rather than focusing on the rooftop. So accordingly, we have changed our strategy, now focusing on the harvesting the rainwater falling on the open spaces.
Hello.
Bodies to take up large number of works. And we have also converged funds from the 15th Central Finance Commission and 5th State Finance Commission grants for utilizing for taking up the rainwater harvesting structures. So I'm happy to 30 districts, 25 districts have taken up rainwater harvesting structures in the last 4-5 months. And out of 114 urban local bodies, 68 urban local bodies have taken up. 734 rainwater harvesting structures have been taken up, out of which 283 have already been successfully completed, harvesting rain during this monsoon itself. And another 319 are under various progress. And so far, the investment made in the rainwater harvesting structure is more than 10 crore. And in fact, I am happy to say that unlimited funds have been provided to the urban local bodies for taking up this these works. And this is the beginning of our journey, just 4 months old. And in the coming 2 years, I'm sure that we will be able to achieve much more, and we would have made substantial progress in achieving water sensitive planning and implementation in our urban local bodies. With this, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Suresh, for this. Thank you, sir, DG sir, for listening to our experiences. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, Mati sir. I take this opportunity to invite Dr. Kajal to unmute herself and take 5-7 minutes to share that how there is a potential she sees as a director of smart cities to address the challenges of depleting groundwater, as well as securing water supply, as well as addressing the groundwater issues, because there is a lot of dependence of cities on these resources, and there is a direct link with the surface water and groundwater. If you can share your experience with us, Dr. Kajal.
Thank you, Dr. Suresh, and good morning, everyone. I heard to all the presentations, and they were really, very insightful. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your views. And I can see we really have a long way to go, particularly in UP. And coming with this background of a medical profession, I think about the kind of laws or the legal structure that should be into place when we are talking about this reuse of water, and we work on that, because I understand that we can reuse the water when we have monsoons and extra water is there. And then particularly if we are using this stormwater and other treated water going back into agricultural practices or for gardening or anything else, there could be some possibilities of contamination and having some diseases. I would like to bring to the notice of the panelists and other people here that I feel there is a gap here, and we don't really, I don't know if there is, but we don't have any legal structure, I think, in place which should address these issues, because it's good to, utilize the water that we can save, but at the same time, we need to understand that, this can bring some, issues with it, and we need to be careful about it, and we really have to have something, some sort of standards or parameters at how much should be the coliforms and other structure and other contaminants or pathogens into it, so that people don't get diseases and other stuff from that. So one was that, and also, since I've been working as director training of the urban local bodies, all the cadres, people like junior engineers and other executive officers, I would say that maybe we really need to focus more on the training part, because I don't think we really have the capacity to really have this vision at the cutting edge. People really need to make changes on the ground. They do not have that much capacity, and I feel that we are weak on that front, and we need to have now people with those expertise, and we need to build those skills and capacity so that we can really have this holistic vision of water sensitive cities and make it more sustainable and resilient, as we have envisaged with the sustainable development goals. So that is something that I feel that should be done. And then, again, one small experience that I feel in UP is people go for boring, right? They dig the underground water, they utilize it, and they do not have any sort of like, they don't have to seek permissions or anything, and which is really leading to a lot of I would say that the water is being mismanaged, and we are now getting into that dark zone that many of our cities are now having scarcity. So now, since I understand that you build a structure, institutionalized mechanism where people should come forward, seek permission for doing this boring and digging out groundwater, but then why, if they haven't done it so far, there was no need and they have been doing it, so then what will incentivize them to come forward and seek for this permission? So we need to bring some policies which will incentivize people to be motivated, because it's not just one-sided thing that we think that okay, from government side we are going to provide this, but at the same time we need to understand why would somebody should do it. We need to walk into their shoes and see like what exactly would bring them on board with us, and the kind of civic sense and other things that we look forward to. There needs to be some policies, I would suggest, that should incentivize people to be motivated, and then I believe that jointly with our citizens and their the approach that we are looking forward to can really be translated into this whole sustainable city thing. So those are some of my few pointers about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kajal. I would like to say that having worked on water sensitive design for 2 decades or so, at least planning and designing, it does incorporate multiple barrier approach to address screening and filtering of pathogens and contaminants before it goes to groundwater or it reaches to the supply systems. However, before I close, I would like the 2 other panelists who are from Australia to answer to these questions, saying that, does water sensitive design take care of your concerns as a director smart cities? So Chris and Michael, if anybody wants to contribute to any of the panelists' apprehensions about how do we move this forward in India.
It just sounds like you've got very ambitious aspirations, and you've got fantastic collaboration occurring now, but there are those sorts of challenges, and I think that the governance and institutional ones are some of those big challenges. So regulation of groundwater, we still have some in the city of Perth, which is very groundwater dependent. We still have some significant issues around regulation of private bores, the recharging of groundwater now using things like water sensitive urban design and recycled water. That's now being accepted by community. We've done quite a bit of advanced research around rain gardens and other water sensitive urban design technologies' ability to deal with bacterial contamination and so on. We're fortunate that we've got good standards around those sorts of things. As you said, Suresh, that that we're probably reasonably advanced in the science and the technologies. The danger then is the need to have the professionals with the capacity to do the appropriate designs and the contractors able to construct them according to those specifications, and then being able to operate and maintain them over time. So all of these things are those sorts of big challenges. Just the things like using rainwater tanks can increase mosquito populations as vectors if you don't have the right sort of maintenance and operation in place. So it's really important to have institutions that can provide oversight for those things, I think. So I think we've got very similar challenges and problems. Yours probably on a greater scale than ours, but there are things we're probably advanced on and things that you're advanced on.
Yeah. So, Michael, I would like to come to you if you want to add something, but I would say that CSC has been doing water harvesting. We have storages and we have introduced the type of fish which breeds on basically the mosquito larvae. Yep. So we have overcome. So there are ways, nature-based solutions to overcome the risks of contamination also. So,
we've had very big concerns in the community and others about mosquitoes with wetlands. We've got hundreds of stormwater treatment wetlands around Melbourne now. None of them have had a mosquito problem because they've all been designed and they're maintained properly. Yeah.
So there is design. So I would say capacity building is emerging as one of the areas in sensitization in India. So Michael, would you like to add something? I know we are really running short of time, but 2 minutes to you and we will plan to close after 5 minutes or so, which is at 11:45. Is that, Harry, fine with you?
Yes, that's fine, Suresh.
Yeah. So, Harry, Michael, if you are still around, if you can contribute that, how do we address the capacity building issue and how both sides we can work together to build this learning from Australia?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be quick around that. So Chris talked briefly about the Clearwater program that we have here, which has been around 2 decades, I think, around capacity building, designers, getting people familiar with these types of approaches and how we roll them out and getting people confident in them. I suppose there are so many potential issues or risks around this kind of stuff, and the importance around trust and doing things properly is because if you get something wrong, it will set the whole process back. It could set the whole process back many decades. So it is really important to draw on your scientific prowess and the people who know things, incorporate those into your designs, and I think really to understand and learn from each other and collaborate across jurisdictions. So it's really one of the great strengths that Australia has actually is that we have these states and smart people within each of the states who do talk to each other, work through problems together, take things back and put them in their own cities in context-specific ways, and work with research institutions to move things forward. So, but yeah, I would just caution that do things properly the first time, because if you stuff it up the first time, it'll take a long time before you get a second go at it.
Good.
And I'll finish there.
Thank you, Michael. And we do plan that, how do we learn from each other? Though it's a difficult time, it is not possible that we come over there and learn that how I interact with you people. But in the coming years, we plan that we will have a capacity building program, hopefully both sides to have more knowledge exchange and twinning program. So, Harry, can I hand it over to you just to brief us about the next steps and give the closing remarks?
Sure, Suresh. Well, thank you all. I'm glad that it's ended on the note that more capacity building is needed, because that's exactly why the 3 organizations here today that's helped to put this together have come together. It's to help build this capacity in institutions and in people in India. And we started with this webinar today, and we have another one next week where we will go in more details on specific projects that have been implemented in Australia and in India. And we'll be able to tease out how we've been able to manage risks such as water quality and contaminations, and also tease out issues around how we've been able to engage community and incentivize them in many ways. So please join us next week. I think it'll be a very exciting event where we go into more details and also see how principles of water sensitive cities are implemented on the ground and in institutions and communities. So on that note, I'd like to thank every speaker and panelist today who's joined us. Thank you very much for your time. It was very good to meet you all. And thank you, Suresh and team, for hosting the event today.
Thank you, Harry. It was good. And thanks to both sides, all the 3 partners, government institutions, government of UP, government of Orissa, Matiji, Kajal, Dr. Kajal, Rajiv Ranjanji, who spared time from the busy schedules. We are actually hoping that we should be able to have something like a city-to-city training program, and we should explore possibility that how we can either virtually or in person in coming years have city-to-city program. Not everywhere is the same situation. There's some cities are ahead of other cities. At least some big cities can learn from Melbourne experience, and we could have some piloting also and monitor that thing, document that thing, and scale up. I think that would be the next webinar focus. So bye for now. Thank you very much to all. Stay safe, and we will be able to connect on the webinar using the same link. Shivali, can you confirm?
It will be a different link.
Okay, it will be a different link. So all people who have registered. So thank you, Mati sir. Thank you, Dr. Kajal. Thank you, Rajiv sir, if you're still around. And thanks, Chris, and all the participants, and Michael, Tarika, Shivali for supporting. Thank you very much. And offline, we connect separately to review the thing. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.